Well, hello and welcome everyone on this beautiful evening. I'm Luis Jaramillo, the director of the creative writing program here at the New School, and it's my pleasure to welcome back our friends and partners, Canem. I'd like to thank Randy Brown Jr., Julie Goldberg, Ben Fama, and Lori Lynn Turner. And now it is my pleasure to leave the podium and welcome to the podium Nicole Seeley, Programs Director for Canem.
Good evening, everyone. As you know, Canem is a national organization dedicated to cultivating the artistic and professional growth of Black poets. Since 1996, Canem has been a home for Black poetry for poets across the country. You can learn more about us, what we're up to, and ways to support by visiting our website, cavecanempoets.org. Please check out the back table where you can buy books and sign up to be on our mailing list. I'd like to thank our generous hosts, the New School, especially my dear friends and colleagues, Luis Jaramillo and Lori Lynn Turner. Thanks also to our funders, the Whiting Foundation, the New York State Council on the Arts, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. And of course, all of you for coming out tonight. It is my pleasure to introduce Jarita Davis, Camille Rankin, and E. Ethelbert Miller. Camille Rankin is the author of Incorrect, Merciful Impulses, the recipient of a Discovery Boston Review Poetry Prize. Rankin's poetry has appeared in American Poet, The Baffler, Narrative, Tin House, among others. She earned a BA from Harvard University and an MFA from Columbia University. She is a visiting professor at University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Jarita Davis is the author of Return Flights. She earned her BA from Brown University and an MA and a PhD from the University of Louisiana, Lafayette. Her work has appeared in the Southwestern Review, Crab Orchard Review, Plain Songs, Tuesday and Art Project, Verdad Magazine, and the Cape Cod Poetry Review. She lives and writes in West Falmouth, Massachusetts. E. Ethelbert Miller is the author of several collections of poetry, most recently the collected poems of E. Ethelbert Miller, and 2 memoirs. Miller has taught at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, American University, George Mason University, and Emory and Henry College. On April 19, 2015, Mr. Miller was inducted into the Washington, D.C. Hall of Fame. Please welcome our readers. First up, Jarita Davis, who will be followed by Camille Rankin, and then finally, E. Ethelbert Miller. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction, Nicole, and thank you to the New School for hosting this event. I'm excited to read with E. Ethelbert Miller and with Camille, and I'm just really pleased to be here. So this is my first collection that I'm reading from. It's from Tagus Press, and the title is Return Flights. It's a collection of poems about African, Cape Verdean and Cape Verdean American culture and history, and a lot of it is personal poems. About my own experiences, kind of tracing my grandfather's footsteps and going back to see his homeland, which he never returned to. Let's see. The first poem I'm going to read has only one word in Creole, preta, which means black, and pretine, which is a diminutive, sort of like a little black one. It's a term of endearment. This poem is called The Children, Their Darkness. Write a poem for the little black girl. How shy and round her face is, how she is the youngest by far and reminds me of my mother in an old photograph taken one afternoon when she was too young and bashful to go anywhere without my grandmother. She gripped her mother's first fingers, watching the camera carefully. But this little girl, who is the youngest and teased, is happy. Even when her father calls her preta and shows the underside of his arm so she can see how light he is, he'd say, black, the best thing to be, even though he resented the woman who wrote dark under complexion on his papers in America. My mother says people from the old country called Papa pretine, and we will never agree on my grandfather's color. She remembers him coming home after weeks on the ship. I only saw him pale, washed out by hospital lights. And I know how much she resents the advice her mother-in-law gave the day my brother was born. Look behind the ears. Look at his cuticles, she said. Look at his testicles, and you can see what color he'll be. My mother clipped the conversation with, he's going to be dark as me. And later, this younger brother would tease me, saying, Mom and Dad had me because they always wanted a little black child. And now it is this little girl I want. I want her dark 6-year-old fingers to squeeze around my own, dark like me. Let's see. This next poem sort of started the whole series altogether. My grandmother and my mother grew up in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and I spent a lot of summers there, and there are a lot of Cape Verdeans who live there. And I was there visiting. My grandmother was very sick, and she actually passed away that summer. But I was there visiting and revisiting this Cape Verdean culture that I had learned so much about. But I grew up in Connecticut, so I wasn't very connected to it. So that's part of writing this series, was to try to learn more and connect more. So this poem is called Atlantic Coasts. And in the first line, there's the word praia, which means beach in Portuguese and in Creole, but it's also the capital city of Cape Verde. So there's a little bit of a dual meaning. Atlantic Coasts. These boys could be in praia, I think. Dried sea salt course across their shoulders, they dig their feet into the sand, chase glimmers of polished glass, and trail tracks along the shore, leaving smudges like their grandfathers left on Cabo Verde at this age. Across the ocean and decades before, 2 boys call to each other in Criollo. I picture the brown mountains watching from behind, and the sea washing up smooth rocks and jellyfish for them. But they're not in Praia, they're here. We're all here in New Bedford, where they dig at the beach with sticks and face the Atlantic from the other side. What are you taking pictures of? The boys ask me. The beach, I say, and they scatter sand behind them to collect their stash. Take a picture of this, the younger one suggests, holding a twisted clump of seaweed and goo. The older boy is serious. He carries stones with important colors for me to photograph. Our tie to each other and to the past is the water. They do not discover and uncover bits from shore, their home, to remember lost family in Cabo Verde. This is where they are. This is where we are. Take a picture of this, the younger one offers, grinning at the snail peering from its shell. If anyone knows anything about Cape Verdean culture, they probably have heard of the Morna, which is a kind of musical form. It's a very slow, bluesy, mournful kind of music. It's beautiful. Cesaria Evora is the most famous, and she's played throughout the world. She passed away a few years ago, but she was known internationally. This poem tries to capture the spirit of that. And if you're familiar with the Portuguese fado, there's a similar kind of, that strong nostalgia. Defining the Morna. I want the violin strings that scrape along this voice's tremor to make an image for you, a piney rosemary bush I can run my palms up the sides of, offer my cupped hands to your nose and mouth to breathe its swoon from my damp skin. Full and heavy and pleading to be held, these images should have more water, like poems that come to me in the shower and shake my footing loose from the tub as I teeter and slip and hear my own voice calling, "Please don't," above the falling water. The night we left the shutters open to the old rolling sea scraping back the sand and chasing itself into the ocean, The salt wave's voice sang the same, but it was entirely new, you and I, lying together in bed, lying too close to touch. I step from the shower, wipe the water from my shoulders. There should be more water, forgetting something, that poem given to me before I caught myself from falling and stood upright again under the warm, slippery spray. This is the Morna, a hymn to longing, a lyric of faded illusions from a voice forgotten in the wet, begging without remembering why the scent of rosemary leaves us faint, and how a moment that waits for dawn makes the old serenades our own. Many of the Cape Verdeans who came to the United States came on whaling ships, and that's how they ended up in places like New Bedford and Nantucket and Rhode Island. And I wrote this poem while at the Nantucket Historical Association as a writer-in-residence, and they had scrimshaw everywhere. I read this poem the last time I was in New York. Damn it, the Scrimshandur. I just like the word Scrimshandur, which is the title of the poem. So any chance I get to read it, and then I get to say Scrimshandur. So my apologies to anyone who's heard this recently. So scrimshaw is the object, and the person who makes it is a Scrimshandur. The Scrimshandur. In between their greasy luck, and after the crew has sealed spermaceti in barrels below, the deck scrubbed down, harpoons and oars bent and broken from the hunt, now mended. Scraps of whale are still scattered about, bits of bone with a graceful arch, a frightful tooth, enormous even in the hand that brought the beast down. The Scrimshandur keeps this in his pocket or in his bunk, and sometimes runs his thumb over the enamel's rough ridges. All the sails are resewn now, and each day slips into the next, while the Scrimshandur files the surface flat and waits for the call from masthead. The sky spreads empty over empty sea, shades upon shades of blue, deep and pale and delicate blue, polished like all variations of the tinged tooth's one color rubbed smooth. The sail needle pricks each point to its own depth, while each wave rises up differently from the last. Foam rolls off the crest of one, then bubbles under. Another wave is blown back by the wind. Each passes, then runs together into the same sea as a Scrimshandur scrapes each point along the lines of one image. He darkens these grooves with soot while the voyage cuts its mark across the finished glassy surface of the sea. So, and to that point, I wanted to read Swimming Lessons, which I marked, but now here it is. Okay. This poem begins with an epigraph from a book by Marilyn Halter, who wrote about Cape Verdean Americans and their history in this country, and it reads as follows. The inhabitants of Brava generally do not know how to swim, but the young boys who wanted to get away on the whalers would learn this skill just to be able to reach the waiting boats. Brava is one of the islands of Cape Verde. It's the smallest island, and it's the island where my grandfather was born. So that's where a lot of the Cape Verdeans came from, the whalers. They came from many islands, but okay, swimming lessons. Today they will learn to float. They hold each other aloft in the lagoon, half stand hip deep. One hand splays the shoulder blades, the other props up the buttocks of a boy, lying stiff across the still water. High rocks protect them from the tide. Those almost afloat focus and focus on breathing. They will their muscles slack before they come up sputtering and choking. The youngest boys collect sea urchins from between the black wet reefs, while the rest raise each other like offerings from sea to sky until each can suspend himself, letting water buoy his body weightless. Tomorrow they will teach themselves to reach the length of the lagoon, holding their heads high above the water. Tonight they race home, salt clotting their hair and filming their dark shoulders and backs. Okay, I would like to read maybe 2 or 3 more. So there are 2 phrases. I always miss one. There are 2 phrases in Creole in here. One is bonne nuit, good night, and one is Jésus Christi campagne, may Jesus Christ go with you. Impressions in stone. Imagine me, the American ghost of my grandfather, walking 80 years behind him through the same stone-clustered village I'd imagined into poems. These mountains, hard and heavy, this sky hazing around me, here roosters crow not to raise the sun into morning, but to untangle clouds from trees and scraps of shrubs. Through sleeping layers of mist, bright hibiscus flash red against the whitewashed walls of this island. I dreamed too practically, and now with camera and notebook, I walk through a life cut from rock. An old woman nods bonne nuit. Her smile caves over toothless gums. 3 boys chase a small pack of goats, kick them back onto the path, and yank them from the rocky ledges with an old rope. A girl walks home barefoot with a cloth sack of bread. From the fog, a donkey brays, and an old man with a cane picks his faded pace past bright laundry, lane across dusty rocks. He wishes Jésus Christi campagne. My dreaming did not make it so. This teenage boy will still tease the village drunk when I'm gone. Children share stolen papayas behind the schoolhouse. A sturdy girl balances a wide bin of mangoes on her head, and our eyes don't meet. Along the narrow street, we pass. We both turn over our left shoulder to see if we have seen each other, really. And then I'll close with, oh, that's a good one though. I will close with Sarah Andrade, age 7. Nome completo means full name, and basta is, that's enough. Sarah Andrade Lobo, age 7. Sarah sits next to me and tries on my sunglasses. She takes my pen and makes a sound, sucking the cap through the space where she lost her front tooth. She writes her nome completo, Sarah Andrade Lobo, in my notebook, along with her sisters and her brothers and her parents' names. She has an aunt in America, but she doesn't know where. She can count to 10 in English. Sarah wants to know what I am writing. I tell her something in English, and she wants me to read. I will not read from my notebook, but I have poetry, and I read that. She watches the words change my face, hears my voice smooth around the sounds. Sarah asks if I can sing, and I say, yes, but I am shy. She points to another poem. She leans against me, knobby little twists of hair against my arm, and she can feel how important the words are from my body's rising breath, the vibration of my chest. When she feels a poem finishing and my voice settling into stillness, Sarah closes the book, touches my hand, and says, basta. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I love Canem, and it's really great to be able to have a book and now be able to share poetry in a Canem reading. It's really lovely. I'm so happy to hear the work of Jarita and Ethelbert Miller. So I'm going to read a few poems from this book. I'm going to start with the first in the collection. Tender. Dear Patriot, dear Catastrophe, none of this means what we thought it did. Dear Bone Fragments, dear Displacement, dear broken skin. I am in over my head. Dear prisoner, dear, dear wounded, you have earned our respect. Dear glad hands, curbed dog, dear perfect object, the same night awaits us. Dear put upon, the day folds over and begins again. Dear bad animal, dear caged thing, there was something about you. Symptoms of prophecy. In the new century, we lose the art of many things. For example, at the beep, I communicate using the wrong machine. A call to say we have two lives and only one of them is real. When the phone rings, you could be anybody. In the evening, you are homeless and hunting for good light, as safe a place as any to make a bed for the night. In both my lives, my nerves go bust. I'm certain that I'm not as I appear, that I'm a figment and you're not really here. The struggle is authenticity. I have a message. You must believe me. This poem, the title is Latin. It comes from expression Deus ex machina, which is God out of the machine. But I've removed the God from the title here. This is just ex machina. Every year is the year the world ends. As I understand it, X is to blame, or aerosol, or the barbarity of X in which we all partake, as is our way. We have come too far to turn away from this kernel that shapes us into other than animal or just animal enough to breed and break. It is a science, the study of what it is in this mind and muscle that makes us sway the weight of us toward give or take in the bare face of each open-mouthed need. And what is our mistake, this clamor that trails us, that shakes us to sleep? What we are capable of, what great hope, what will become of me? History. Our stone wall was built by slaves, and my bones are paid for. We have two of everything, twice heavy in our pockets, warming our two big hands. This is the story as I know it. One morning, the ships came as foretold, and death, pearl-handled, almost and completely. How cheap a date I turned out to be. Each finger weak with the memory, lost teeth, regret. Our ghosts walk the shoulders of the road at night. I get the feeling you've been lying to me. So the next poem, the title comes from my obsession with Law & Order mostly. I watch a lot of that show, mostly the original. Just going to point that out there. And I picked up from this show, hours and hours of my commitment to it, this term, it's educational, this term necessity defense, which means the kind of defense you use if you've committed a crime, but it's justified by if you murder someone or kill someone, rather, but you're doing it to save your own life or someone else's, and that's called a necessity defense. So this is necessity defense of institutional memory. So the free may remain free. Say the nightmare is the dream. So we are preserved He who believes takes a life. So a life may be saved, a girl becomes an object. So the greatest devastation occurs, let go her fingers, their slim cleave, so that I may be replaced by a machine which, in its violence, behaves more like me. The longer you live, the more these lies come alive. So the past splits in two. One stays in the past and dies. One past shapeshifts, walks with you. The next poem, I took the title from an essay from Martha Nussbaum. And it's an essay on compassion, and she's writing about this idea that when one starts to really concern oneself with issues and trials of those who are really far outside their immediate circle, they lose the ability to care about what's happening right next to them. And it's as if it's an either-or thing, and they kind of become dead into the things that are within their immediate life. This is the problem of death within life. Given leave to speak, I shape my tongue into a shovel and ask for more. I should have told the truth, but the truth is incomplete. I seek the missing pieces and my eyes go lazy. It's a choice I make that ruins me. I get off easy. I let myself go. I hide the faces of the dying, wrap what remains in lace and tuck it in the bottom drawer. I'm sure I've pitied you all wrong. I don't know how it's done. I never learned. I engulf with an affection from a chasm in my gut, a sweet trap door, a heart-shaped hole, a pretty well that threatens to swallow me up. This is a brief malfunction. When you shift out of the frame, the feeling shorts and dissipates in sparks. What a mess I've made of this emotion. It's only endlessness I've wanted. I can't fill my bowl or yours. I can't keep my fool mouth shut. The current isolationism. In the half-light, I am most at home. My shadow is company. When I feel hot, I push a button to make it stop. I mean, the stain on my mind I can't get out. How human I seem. Like modern man, I traffic in extinction. I have a gift. Like an animal, I sustain. A flock of birds, when touched, I scatter. I won't approach until the back is turned. My heart betrays. I confess I am afraid. How selfish of me. When there's no one here, I have the distance between our bodies infinitesimally. In this long passageway, I pose against the wallpaper, dig my heels in, catch the light. In my vision, the back door opens on a garden that is always in bloom. The dogs are chained so they can't attack like I know they want to. In the next yard over, honeybees swarm, and their sound is huge. So the next poem I wrote for my grandfather, who passed away a few years ago. My family's Jamaican, and my grandfather's Jamaican. And when he died, my uncle told a story at the funeral about how he used to swim in the Kingston Harbor. And this poem is actually not named. It's named for a different harbor in Jamaica, Dry Harbor, which is where Columbus first arrived and discovered the country and all those who were already living there, and then promptly killed all of them. Thanks, Columbus. So it's since been renamed Discovery Bay in honor of his discovery, but I named this poem Dry Harbor. At the shore, the water is rush and retreat, taking my footprints with it, a quiet delete. What's buried here won't stay in the ground. Now you are gone, I make you again and again. You are the boy in the harbor on another hot day. You are the boy watching the horses leap over your head to cool themselves in the harbor. You are the man daydreaming the horses leap into the harbor, their ripple and gleam. I've come to understand we are accident and disease. A door left open, a gust, a weed, a ship docked in the wrong harbor, a pandemic liquidation through the hills, the cane fields, and then there was you. And then there was me, with no land but this mouth and the dead who can't speak. Oh, people of the earth, how easily they slip back into it. How tired I am of these bodies in the water, of what's lost that can't come back. The ocean spills and swallows and remains steadfast. Genealogy. I was born in a forest. I don't know my name. I was born on a mountain, but changed my mind. I was born in the desert. All my people died in the fire and left me with the gods. They called me dust, how it burned me. I come from the sea, I believe. I come from beryl, aquamarine. All my people rode their horses off the edge of the world and left me on your doorstep. They called me sorrow. I don't know my name. I come from wartime, how it burned me. I was born aflame, I believe. A sun so intentional, a sun in repose, a sun in continuous sunset, sinking into the ground. So I'm going to read one more. I just want to say thanks again, everyone, for coming, and thanks to Canem and the New School for hosting this reading and letting me listen to these poets tonight. We have been the buyer, the bought, the boy's blood in the dirt. Have been the woman in winter, the knife of her hunger, have been the knife at her throat. Have ravaged and burned, been burned. Have been the rope that hangs, the hands that bind the hands that set the flame. Have been a land cleared by the flame, a land lit by the moon, a sky cleared by lit homes. Have been a man reduced to a body to bones. Have emboldened, been made bold. Have been uplifted, held under, mourned, been mourned. Have been a tale told and untold. Have been a language lost, owning nothing of ourselves. Have been a love that dims the line drawn between us to remind. Have deceived, been taken in. Have been destroyed, have been beginning, have been discovery, a new fruit growing ripe within our skins. Thank you.
I'm going to read 10 poems. The first 3 poems are about my mother, who passed away a few years ago. I don't read that much in New York City, so coming here is very moving for me. I grew up in the South Bronx. I left here probably 1968. And coming back, and especially being in this part of the city, which is my favorite part of the city, just get a sense of what it means to be a New Yorker. And to see so many friends here that I don't get to see that much, see some of my students here. This is very special. And also Cave Canem, because I remember when this was an idea, you know, in terms of going back and dealing with Cornelius Eady and Troy Derricotte. It was an idea. And when to listen to you guys here, this is the tradition. There's been nothing like this. This is the making of history. You have people here who want to be writers, and they can have a community. You know, this Cave Canem, this Canto Mundo. This is a change, and this is very important, and we're making history, and I'm glad to be at least a part of it. This poem is called Boxing with Your Mom, epigraph by Yusuf Komunyakaa. Whoever said men hit harder when women are around is right. You push the door open not knowing what to expect. She sits in a chair next to her hospital bed, just sitting. How long? Before you can even enter the room, a big smile of recognition kisses her lips before she kisses you. Her seamstress eyes survey your clothes. You're a rhinestone of a sun slipping between her shaking hands. As the spark leaves her eyes, she withdraws under her hospital robe. So small she looks, so small she is. You want to leave, but you just came. It's just you and her. You're overmatched. Her moods change so quickly you can't avoid her jabs. There's bitterness in each blow. She has you against the wall. You're fighting with her again. This is sick, you tell yourself. You want to leave, but the bell never rings. You're trying to love her too much. You're losing another round. I grew up with movies, and I'm the baby. How many are the baby of the family? I'm the baby, right? They're the babies. We should be sitting up front. And I tell people this. I thought my name was Shh. You know, Shh. You're not supposed to know anything. Shh. You know, and then you grow up. You know, I grew up thinking that Uncle Ben was my grandfather, because they look alike. You know, when you're small. Oh, it's my grandfather, Uncle Ben. I won't tell you about Aunt Jemima, but Uncle Ben was anyway. And then there was a point where I thought my mother was as beautiful as Loretta Young. I remember Loretta Young for Enid Miller. I'm holding my mother's death certificate. There are no more secrets between us. I know the exact time she departed, 3:45 p.m. I even know her Social Security number. I'm holding more than my mother's hand. On my mother's death certificate, her occupation is listed as homemaker. Who wrote this? I thought an occupation was when you did what you did when you left the house, when you went downtown and punched a time card or carried a briefcase. I thought my mother was a seamstress, a woman who sewed rhinestone on the clothes, a woman who worked in a factory. Maybe my mother only did this when my father failed as a homemaker, when he could no longer pay all the bills, when there was a need for more money. Did my mother change her clothes while I was sleeping? Did she leave the house when I was at school? Homemaker. I thought my mother was a housewife. I thought a homemaker was someone I saw on television. One day I told my brother and sister that our mother was Loretta Young. They laughed at me and kept their secrets to themselves. Now my sister sends me my mother's death certificate. It comes in the mail with the latest copy of the New Yorker and a few bills. At the bottom of the document is the cause of death. All the words have something to do with the heart. Nowhere do I see the word love. All the boxes checked are too small. I grew up, there's people that I admire. You remember back in the days when, you know, like Jesse Jackson was running for president? Yeah, I want to be like Jessie. Then it was like Obama, and you could be like, but you have these people that you want to be like, Growing up in New York, I wanted to take Cleet Boyer's place in the Yankees, be Mickey Mantle. Then I had friends who wanted to be Willie Mays, their hat fall off. And then there was Houdini. Like Houdini, who could just escape from all of this. And so I wrote this, because if there's one person who would know something about Houdini and escaping, would be my mother, who didn't let me escape. Excerpts from the Lost Diary of the Black Houdini for Enid Miller. 1. What if I told you slavery was nothing but a magic trick gone wrong? Would you believe me? 2. It was during segregation that I decided to hang myself upside down, my feet pointing north and upwards, my head still in the south. 3. There is no prison I cannot escape from. I've known blackness. 4. When I was a young boy, I was a runaway. I disappeared from the plantation and then history. 5. What is the difference between escape and erasure? How many times have I changed my name? 6. The color line makes us all acrobats. I learned to pass white folks without a net. 7. The crowd applauds after each performance. When they look into their mirrors, they see me. 8. I taught Marcus Garvey the hat trick. Everyone loves a parade. 9. King tells me his dream. I consult my dream book and find a page missing. 10. My father takes me to Coney Island. He tells me all of America is an amusement park. Learn to laugh or die. 11. Fame made me a race leader. I get paid for describing misery, not magic. 12. White teeth and a big smile. I hide the key under my tongue. 13. Let me tell you about metamorphosis. It will explain why I'm there and not here. 14. Love is a pair of handcuffs. Do I want to escape? Can I? 15. My mother died yesterday afternoon. All my life, I've been trying to reach her. 16. I hold my breath and keep counting. How long can I survive underwater without love? I think I'll change this reading order. I'll make this next poem interactive. You know what interactive means? I go to a lot of meetings. I chair the board of Institute for Policy Studies, progressive think tank in DC. So I'm always going to meetings. And if you're running literary organizations, you're going to meetings too. So there's a word that you like to say, but sometimes you can't say it that much. But because I'm here and this is, the reading, when I point to you, you can say that word because I know you want to say it. You know what that word is? Money. All right? So when I point to you, that's all you got to say. Even if you don't even have any money, you can say it, right? Okay, all right. Meetings. I'm sitting in another meeting where people are talking about money. They call this fundraising. We spend the time talking about people who have money. We mention names of people we don't know. This is what you do when you don't have money. You talk about people who do. Before the meeting ends, there's agreement among everyone to contact 3 people who have money. I leave the meeting knowing I won't make any calls. I walk down the street talking to myself. At the bus stop, I search my pockets for money. This, too, is fundraising. When the bus arrives, all the poor people board. I'm on my way to another meeting. The poor people are going to work. A guy sitting in front of me is yelling on his cell phone. He's talking about money. He says, I don't give a fuck. I want my fucking money. This, too, is fundraising. And this is a poem about what Nicole did not say earlier today. Cell phones. In the days before cell phones, we spent our time looking for loose change. We ran to the phone. We tripped over phone cords or stood on lines waiting to use a phone. We forgot phone numbers. We were listed in phone books. There was no text messaging. In the days before cell phones, there was phone sex, and people slept with their phones. Phones were big and hung on walls. You could cradle a phone and wait for a sweet dial tone. If you were lonely, you could call the operator. There was always someone to assist you. Today, everyone has a cell phone. They spend days and nights talking in strange places. You could be in the middle of reading a poem, and someone's cell phone will ring. In the days before cell phones, you searched frantically in your bag, trying to find something to write with. You wanted to find a pen, not a phone, before the ringing in your head stopped. I went back and some of these are really old poems, but one poem that I like, I started reading again, is this poem for Winnie Mandela. And I wrote this after Winnie's house in Soweto was burned down, I think by some black high school kids. But I also wrote this at a time when there was always these rumors about Nelson being released. And I felt that probably there was that moment where Winnie just got tired of hearing that. This time, the fire did not reach my heart. When the cameras and reporters came, I had already picked through the rubble. I found a wedding gift, pictures of our children, all lying in the ashes, the earth they call South Africa, the land I love but cannot own. Nelson, tonight, I no longer wait for your release. I no longer wait for the rumor or the promise. I have accepted the loneliness of courage. I have accepted the loneliness of struggle. Even when my own people come to burn my home, I will open my arms and welcome, for my love extends to them also. I will forgive them just as Africa must forgive me if I ever stop and say, I cannot go on. My dear Nelson, what does it matter if we lose this life? I dream of a tomorrow without funerals. Even as your hair turns gray, when you smile, I am reminded of that morning after our marriage when you promised me a free South Africa, and I knew I would love you until death. And this is Nelson Mandela. And one of the things that happened to him when he was dealing with the rocks, the ability to have tears. A cold and trembling thing. It is the darkness of my cell at night that finds me clinging to a sip of prayer and a crumb of hope. What if I opened my eyes after 27 years only to discover I could no longer cry? What then? There are laws that must be broken like stones. I am Mandela, a prisoner on an island. Why is freedom sometimes a cold and trembling thing? This is New York. Is this the history of air? I can't breathe, he said, but there was no air. Only the absence of trees and rope, the swaying of history over another black body. And the last poem I'll read is what people call my signature poem. All the writers should have their signature poem. When I was at Howard University, the great poet Sterling Brown always had a signature poem. And he would always close his readings with strong men. And that became almost a classic. And what happens is that after a while, I did some research and found out that he used to close his reading with Old Limb, which is a much more political poem. And I was always curious about what was the change in terms of, you know, why did he change that reading of that last poem? This is not a dramatic moment. I have cataracts that are sneaking up on me. That's what's going to happen to you writers. And then your poems will be read to you, hopefully with love and affection. And since this is my signature poem, I can take the time finding it. And you'll wonder what it is. It's called Divine Love. And I can't read my handwriting here. What happened is I wrote this poem because of the technology. I was always writing these poems, ending letters with a little signature, and I always would end a letter by email by saying, "I would have loved you like Ellington loved jazz, and Bearden loved scissors." And then my friend who's up here in New York now, Elizabeth Alexander, would write back, "I love you more than blah, 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 blah." So we went back and forth. And then what happened, the writer and novelist, Alex Pate, who lives in Minneapolis, married Sue Gin, and I put all these little lines together, and this was their wedding poem. They lived in Minnesota. There was a very corny line in the poem, "I love you more than Minnesota loves the Twins." Yeah, if I took that out, so I took that out. But this is the poem, and I like to end on this because you know, I'm blessed in terms of hearing new voices here tonight, and what you want to always leave a room, especially a reading, or even when we go to museums and art, we have to have a sense of what is beautiful indoors, and reminding ourselves about that, reminding ourselves about love, reminding ourselves about the importance of the beloved community, and what do they say? If you don't see it out there, you have to bring it into existence. That's our job. That's our responsibility, especially as artists. Divine love. I wish I had loved you many years ago. I would have loved you like Ellington loved jazz and Bearden loved scissors. I would have loved you like Langston loved Harlem and the blues loved Muddy Waters. I would have loved you like Douglas loved to read and Garvey loved parades. I would have loved you like Zora loved stories and Du Bois loved suits. I would have loved you like Lewis loved boxing and Mahalia loved to sing. I would have loved you like Carver loved peanuts and Wheatley loved poems. I would have loved you like Jimmy loved Lorraine and Ozzy loved Ruby. I would have loved you like Martin loved Jesus and Malcolm loved Allah. Thank you.
Another round of applause for our readers, Jarita Davis, Camille Rankin, E. Ethelbert Miller. Join us next Thursday, 7 p.m. at Housing Works Bookstore in Soho as we celebrate Cave Canem's 20th anniversary with a fellows reading. Thank you so much for coming out. Please stay, buy a book, talk to the poets. Thanks so much.